Realm presents Remade, Season 1, Episode 8.
Inez leaned forward and dipped a hand into the pocket of the seat in front of her. She pulled out a square, translucent sheet with cartoons of people in various states of panic and distress. She couldn't read the writing, of course, but the bottom of the sheet had a picture of one of those camera robots, what the others called caretakers. The swirls and squiggles under the caretaker appeared in many of the other captions, suggesting that if the train had a water emergency, she really didn't want to know how that would happen, as illustrated by one cartoon of a woman pinching her nose and puffing her cheeks as a fish swam out of her ear. Passengers should listen for the caretaker's instructions, while holding their breath, it seemed. Helpful. The cartoon blurred, and Inez was surprised to find tears in her eyes. Stupid. She crumpled the sheet and dropped it to the floor. After a moment, the page unfolded and smoothed itself out like new. She kicked it under the seat ahead of her. "Hey, you okay?" Inez twisted around and saw a Desi girl holding a cup of something that looked like coffee and smelled like coffee. Inez had learned the hard way that it tasted like hot orange juice with a twist of ass. Inez rubbed the tears from her eyes and nodded. "I'm Sunita Prasad." The girl sat across the aisle from her. "And you're Inez?" "I guess word travels fast." "It's a short train, and you and Teddy made quite an impression." "Because of our dramatic appearance at the train station or our ridiculous clothes?" When Sunita smiled, her nose crinkled. "Both were memorable, but mostly it's because we've seen Teddy young on football nights. Plus, either we talk about you two, or we talk about what happened." "And no one wants to talk about what happened," Inez said. Even so, she had learned enough about the caretakers and their murderous rampage while helping Nevaeh tend to the other teens' injuries. Inez and Teddy had been on a vacation compared to what this group had gone through. A psychotic, forced vacation, but still, no one had died. "I've been trying to find something to read for distraction," Inez said. "But so far, all I found is 20 copies of what look like safety instructions in high emoji, or whatever that wackadoodle writing is. All I want is one trashy magazine or a shitty bestseller, preferably in English or Spanish. I'd even settle for Esperanto. By the way, I wouldn't drink that." "Too late." Sunita lifted the cup and inhaled deeply. "But it still smells good." Inez was about to ask if she could take a whiff when she heard a shout and a muffled pop from up ahead. She was out of her seat and moving up the aisle before the first person asked, "What was that?" "That sounded like trouble," Gabe said. "What now?" someone else cried. Holden was also standing at the front of the car, looking around. "Loki, where'd he go?" Hyrum held up his hand, like a kid asking for permission to go to the bathroom. "I saw him with Nevaeh a few minutes ago. They went to the next car up." "Shit," Holden said. Inez quickly surveyed the car. Was anyone else missing? Teddy. "I'll go check it out," Holden said. "The rest of you stay here." But Inez was already past him and moving across the gap to the sleeping car, Holden's protest drowned out by the rattle of the train. Umta poked her head out of one of the high bunks as she ran by. Holden caught up to Inez in the Barbie nightmare house. He stared at the bizarre plastic furniture in the train car. Jesus. Inez stopped at the door leading to the next car up. "They must be in there." She pressed an ear to the door and heard humming machinery and muffled voices. "I don't know how to open it." Holden pressed a hand to the panel beside the door. "Huh, that should have worked." Inez rolled her eyes. "We tried that yesterday." "Did you try this?" He knocked on the door. A moment later, it opened. Teddy was on the other side. "What's going on?" "We heard a shot," Inez said. Teddy held up his hands. "Hold on, everyone's fine. Don't get angry, okay? Let me tell you what—" "Telling me not to get angry makes me angry." Inez pushed past him and took in the scene. The camera, the caretaker, that had greeted Inez and Teddy when they boarded the train, lay at Loki's feet, now as motionless as a knocked-over trash can. Multicolored lights flashed erratically over its body. A black bolt protruded from the single eye in the center of the robot's head. Smoke curled from its shattered lens, and Inez smelled burnt toast. So, this is where the camera went, she thought. She'd been looking for it as they explored the train, but since they knew it was harmless, she and Teddy had decided not to tell everyone it was on board until they had calmed down a little. She had figured this was exactly how they would react. Loki pointed his gun at the caretaker, hands wrapped around the grip just like the cops did on TV. Only the gun was shaking, and he looked somewhat surprised. Nevaeh stood beside him, one hand over her mouth as she stared down at the fallen robot. "What the shit happened here?" Inez asked. Loki turned toward her, raising his arms to aim the gun at her chest. She froze for a moment before her instincts kicked in. "You want to point that somewhere else?" she growled. Loki blinked and then snapped out of it. He jerked the gun down to point at the ground. "Not cool, man," Teddy said. "I just saved all of us," Loki said. "From what?" Inez asked. "That." Loki glanced at the fallen caretaker. "Is this true?" Inez asked Teddy. "Well, Loki saw the camera and kind of, freaked out." Teddy's eyes widened. "But it kind of looked to us like it was driving the train. Right, Nevaeh?" "It attacked us," Loki said. Inez turned to Nevaeh. "It moved," Nevaeh said. She looked shaken. Holden went to her side and murmured something too low for Inez to hear. She nodded quickly. Inez looked at Teddy. "It turned and looked at Loki. It could have been going for him, but..." Teddy said. "What?" Inez asked. "I think it was responding to the gun. I mean, that's how it looked to me," Teddy said. "That's it. Give me that gun. You can have it back after class." Inez held her hand out. "No, I need this to protect us," Loki said. "Good job, Deadshot. You didn't save anyone. If that thing was running the train, you may have killed us all." "Hey, it's okay," Holden said quietly. "It is not okay. You two were fighting before, remember? Do you want someone like him walking around with the only gun?" Loki's eyes narrowed. "We can trust Loki." Holden's eyes pleaded with her. He didn't know what the caretaker was about to do. None of us do. He had to think fast. There's a difference between acting and reacting. Sometimes it's the difference between life and death. Holden winced. "If you'd seen what those things did..." "I know. They're messed up. And you have good reason to be afraid of them." She rubbed her wrists, still raw from when the caretaker back at Teddy's house had held her down and dressed her as a cheerleader. Holden glanced at the scabbed-over slash in her forearm. She didn't explain that she'd done that to herself. "But the ones Teddy and I dealt with were very different from the ruthless killing machines you described. When we boarded, this one just hovered in one place until we pressed a button and started the train. Sounds like it didn't do anything remotely threatening until Loki started waving his dick around." Inez crossed her arms. Holden narrowed his eyes. "You knew a caretaker was on the train this whole time? And you didn't say anything?" "I made an informed decision to avoid starting a panic. So much for that." "If you'd mentioned it earlier, I wouldn't have been caught off guard," Loki said. "We would have known what was in this room." "He has a point," Holden said. "You can't have this." Loki stashed the gun in his backpack. "Loki," Inez began. Teddy shook his head. "Leave it for now," he murmured. "We'll keep a close eye on him." Inez sighed. "Let's see if we can salvage anything from that caretaker." She turned and saw that Holden and Nevaeh were still keeping their distance from it. "Oh, for fuck's sake! It doesn't even have arms. Or an eye anymore." She walked toward the robot, and Teddy followed close behind, her big, dopey shadow. This caretaker was short, only about 4 feet tall. Teddy towed the body. The caretaker rocked a little on its curved back, but otherwise there was no reaction. There were fewer blinking lights than there'd been a minute ago. "It's dead," Teddy said. "It was never really alive," Nevaeh said. "True. Well, then systems are not functional." Teddy grinned. Inez glanced between him and Nevaeh. This wasn't her Teddy. This was the charming, smarmy Teddy as seen on TV. There were the two big, round buttons she remembered in the center of the caretaker's trunk, red and green. Normally, you were never supposed to press a red button, but since green had meant go before, she figured red might stop the train. Inez pressed the red button. Nothing happened. She pressed it a couple more times, then tried green. It flickered and went dark, followed a second later by the red button. Then the last of the robot's flashing lights winked off. "Anyone here good with electronics?" she asked Holden. Silence. "What?" she asked. Jingwei." Nevaeh's voice broke and she turned away. "Oh, shit. Sorry." That was certainly inconvenient. She couldn't blame the group for being devastated over the friends they'd lost. If anything had ever happened to her family, she swallowed. She knew exactly how much that would hurt. She'd come close to losing someone she loved. But she also knew she wouldn't watch and let it happen. She would do something. She knew that now, for whatever that was worth. There just wasn't time to grieve or feel sorry for yourself when shit was happening to you. Holden seemed to come to the same conclusion. The mention of the dead girl's name spurred him forward. "I'm sure we can figure out the manual controls." He moved toward the console at the front of the cab. "Oh, great. More of that writing." Inez followed him to the console and looked out the wide window at the track ahead. She had always liked riding in the front of cars and trains. Even if you weren't driving, it somehow felt better to see where you were going. Train tracks were like your future. Except she had no future here. But hell, she learned to adapt quickly when everything went to crap before. Her whole life plan had changed when Pappy died. Goodbye San Francisco State. Hello San Diego Community College. Who else was going to mind the store and keep the little kids in line? Mammy couldn't do it on her own. Now Inez's life was off track again, only she couldn't see what was coming. What kind of plan could she make here? Her only goal at the moment was to stay alive. Inez suddenly recalled that the first car was the worst place to be in the event of a train accident. Or was that the last car? Shouldn't an emergency brake have kicked in when the caretaker went offline? She asked. After that weird car back there, I'm losing confidence in whoever designed this train, Holden said. Who knows how it works? Inez scanned the console. Its lights were blinking erratically, and some of them were off. But she didn't know what it was supposed to look like. She would have been happier if there were more green lights. Hey! Holden pointed to a cable snaking from the console. They followed the silver wire down to the floor and back to the caretaker. Uh-oh, Holden said. He ducked down and prodded at the bottom of the console. Do you see that palm scanner up there? The black glass panel on the right? He called up. Inez checked. Yeah. Put your hand on it. Are you sure? Nope. Inez pressed her hand to the plate. She was surprised when something inside the console clicked. She pulled her palm away and saw her sweaty handprint slowly fade. That did it. Holden removed the panel. A tendril of smoke whisked from the opening. Inez crouched and stared inside the compartment alongside Holden. She smelled scorched metal and plastic. Holy spaghetti monster, Holden said. The cables inside were all tangled together. Some of them were disconnected, dangling loose. Some had obviously been cut. Thin glass rectangles that reminded Inez of computer circuits littered the bottom of the compartment. Those should probably be inside the slots there. What a mess, she said. Someone went all DIY in there, Holden said, and everything's fried. What the hell? Holden and Inez turned and saw Saya standing in the doorway. Holden scrambled to his feet. Saya, is everything okay back there? Better than up here. She took in the scenario. You took so long, we decided to see what was happening. The rest of the group was huddled behind Saya in the nightmare room. This is creepy, Hyrum said. Inez stood up to address the group. Well, there's good news and bad news. There was a caretaker in here, but it's, broken now. So what's the bad news? Gabe asked. He edged inside behind Saya. It was getting crowded. That was the bad news, Inez said. Then what's the good news? Saya asked. The train is still running, Holden said. Yay? Except that we have no way of controlling the train. Inez pointed at the dead caretaker. Loki watched her from the far side of the car, but didn't say anything. Doesn't it run automatically? Gabe asked. This thing was running it automatically. Inez kicked the caretaker hard enough to make it roll over. Not anymore. Maybe it'll stop when we reach the next station, even without the caretaker, Gabe said. I hope so, but I'd still prefer being able to stop it on our own if we have to, Inez said. We shouldn't do anything until we decipher this panel. It'd be dangerous to press buttons randomly, Holden said. Besides, if you ask me, the more distance we put between us and those other caretakers, the better. No one asked you, Holden. But what if we're heading for Caretaker Central? Nevaeh asked. Also a good point. Holden deflated. So your plan is to wait and see what happens? Inez asked. Holden nodded. That is the opposite of a plan, Inez said. Let's push those buttons. She moved for the console, but Holden stepped in front of her. The train has to stop sometime. Meanwhile, we have food, shelter, bathrooms, beds. Let's ride it to the end of the line, Holden said. That's what I'm afraid of, the end of the line, Inez said. For all we know, the track just loops around like the fucking Snowpiercer. No final destination. She waited for someone else to back her up, to pick a side, but nothing. After what they'd gone through, they were paralyzed. Not even by indecision, but by not wanting to decide anything more complicated than when to eat, and whether they wanted protein fries or chicken things with their crappy meal. Inez exited the car and pushed through the crowd, headed for the back of the train. Where are you going? Holden called. Nowhere fast. Someone should stay in the cab in case another problem comes up, she yelled over her shoulder. Not that they could do anything about it yet. She figured there had to be an emergency brake in case the caretaker malfunctioned or was shot by a deranged rider. Maybe in one of the cars with all the passenger seats. She wasn't willing to accept that they had no options. And she wasn't going to discover those options sitting on her ass. Inez's cool exit was ruined when she nearly tripped over Umta, huddled at the back of the group. The weird little woman was quiet. She hadn't said much since she'd gotten on board, but Holden had said she'd gone 3 rounds with one of those giant, murdering machines, and she looked like it. Pardon, Inez muttered as she edged around her. Excuse me, Teddy said behind her. Inez glanced back and hid a smile when she saw he was following her. I could use your help up here, Teddy. Holden flicked his eyes toward Loki meaningfully. I'm going to help Inez find a way to stop this crazy thing. If I don't, she'll probably end up setting the train on fire, Teddy said. Like she did to my house. Your fake house? So we could escape it and the mad caretaker. And please, burning the train is like Plan D, Inez said. What's Plan A? Plan A is coming up with something better than Plan D. Inez opened the door and crossed the vestibule to the next car down. Through a narrow gap in the floor of the gangway, she glimpsed the tracks racing past at a breathtaking speed, only a few feet below them. Teddy put a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Never look down. Get a move on, Inez yelled. She clapped her hands loudly, and Sophia shot up in bed. You're going to miss your bus. Which meant Inez would be late for school, because she'd have to drive Sophia. Again. And she'd have to listen to Sophia talk nonstop the whole way. When she wasn't comatose, she never stopped moving and yammering. It sometimes seemed a shame to wake her up. Sophia slumped backward onto her pillow, eyes closed. Gabby giggled. Inez pointed a finger at her. If you aren't helping, I'm part of the problem, Gabby recited. What's wrong with you, letting Sophia stay in bed this long? Inez said. Gabby's eyes watered. Oh, great. She thought it would be funny, Carmen said. Am I laughing? Inez asked. Maybe on the inside? Carmen said. A teensy tiny bit? Inez shook her head. And what's your excuse? I'm notoriously undependable. Big vocab for a 9-year-old. Carmen must have gotten into Inez's SAT review books again. Inez's least favorite word was precocious. Is Sophia in trouble? Carmen smiled hopefully. Inez glared at her little sisters. You two get downstairs. You have 3 minutes to eat your breakfast. Don't bother chewing. Inhale it. After the troublemakers had bustled out, Inez closed the bedroom door and leaned against it, enjoying a brief moment of peace. She breathed in and out, listening to their heavy footsteps on the stairs, then muffled shrieks and yells from downstairs. Someone started crying. She couldn't remember a time when there weren't little ones underfoot. She sighed and tackled the more immediate problem. She whipped Sophia's sheets off the bed. A paperback book smacked to the floor at her feet. So this was the culprit. She picked it up. The Babysitter's Club Super Special No. 7. Snowbound. A classic. The soft, worn cover felt familiar. This was Inez's old copy. It still bothered her that not one of the officers was Hispanic. The snowy border on the cover was not the whitest thing on it. Hey, Christy, you bossy bitch. Inez couldn't fault Sophia for staying up late reading, but she couldn't keep doing this. Now that Sophia was at the full mercy of the chill morning air, Inez noticed that she was already dressed. Weird, but convenient. The girl's blouse and pleated plaid skirt were wrinkled, but this would save time. Which was probably why Sophia had done it in the first place. She was very practical, except when it came to bedtime. Sophia tried to curl into a ball and burrow her head under a pillow, but Inez was too fast. She swept the girl up and hustled her over to the bathroom to wash her face and brush her teeth and hair. Then it was downstairs with her. Inez plopped Sophia at the breakfast table, still half asleep. She shoved a silver-dollar pancake between the girl's lips. Sophia's mouth worked slowly. The pancake disappeared incrementally. Inez checked the clock. She was going to make it. Shit! She still hadn't put on her own pants. She ran out of the kitchen. Gabby and Carmen were standing by the door, shoes, coats, and backpacks on. Good. Gabby was eating a cookie. Not good. Gabby, Inez said. Inez? Inez turned and saw her mother at the foot of the stairs, her arms crossed. Mommy's eyes flicked downward. Pence? Who has time to get dressed? Inez said. Maybe Sophia had the right idea. Mommy gestured with a finger. Ven aquí. That was her uh-oh voice. Inez approached her mother cautiously. You made Gabriella cry? Mommy asked. She's too sensitive. She's a baby. She's only 7. She has to grow up. No one had ever cut Inez any slack because of her age. She didn't wake up Sophia this morning. Inez glanced into the kitchen. Sophia's face was on her plate, but her hand was creeping along the table toward the tumbler of orange juice. I can't do everything around here, Inez went on. Someone needs to be their mother? Mommy smiled. That's not what You don't do everything around here, Inez, Mommy said. You're right, you can't, and you shouldn't. But you do a lot, maybe too much. And I appreciate it, we all do. It's supposed to be beautiful today. Ava and Clara are taking the kids to the beach after school. Why don't you go with them? Mommy said. As a babysitter? No, thanks. Gabby and Carmen were annoying sometimes, but Tia Ava's 2-year-old twin girls had earned their nickname, Double Jeopardy. And Tia Clara's son, Mateo, got away with everything as the only boy of their generation. I'd rather do my shift at the store. No, you should go as a break, Mommy said. You won't have to do anything. You can relax, work on your tan. You look so pale and tired lately. A suntan is your skin's way of trying to protect itself from damage, Inez said. Do you even know how to have fun? Her mother looked so disappointed in her. Going to the beach would be nice. Inez always layered on the sunscreen, but she missed the warm sun on her bare skin, the salt on the air, damp sand between her toes, the swimsuits. She'd been too busy to get to the shore all summer, which was ridiculous, considering they practically lived on the coast. I have to do the inventory tonight, Inez said. Working too hard killed your father, Mommy said. Inez fingered the tiny gold crucifix on the chain around her neck, her last gift from Poppy. Technically, a brain aneurysm killed him, Mommy. He'd ignored it when he started getting bad headaches, when his vision began to blur. What could he have done anyway without health insurance? No one even knew about his health problems until the aneurysm ruptured. So tragic, so stupid, so avoidable. Inez! We can't afford to lose anyone else. If you get sick, what am I supposed to do around here? Tricky, Mommy. Let me put it this way, Mommy said. You're fired. What? You can't do that. You can have your job back tomorrow in exchange for a single seashell. Now I'm in some fairy tale? Go to the beach, Inez. Can I invite my friends? Mommy waved her hand. Whatever will make you enjoy yourself. Fine, she said, starting to smile as she thought of how shocked Ramon, Lita, Callie, and Astrid would be when she texted them. They were still besties at school, but they'd stopped inviting her out to things because she either said no or ended up not showing. I'll come back home during my free period and pack everyone's swimsuits and some snacks. And sunscreen. And we'll need those plastic buckets and blankets. Inez started building a mental checklist. I'll pick up the girls after school and we can leave from there. The tias can meet us there with los pequeños monstruos. Slow down, mija. You're starting to stress me out. I don't want to waste any time. Inez glanced at the clock. Oh, shit. Sophia, let's go. Inez raced toward the door and grabbed her backpack. You kiss your mother with that mouth? Mommy asked. Inez took the hint. Shit, sorry, Mommy. She came back and kissed her mother on the cheek. Her mother slapped her lightly on the cheek. Beyoncé. Sophia trudged to the door. She looked sleepy, but she was mobile. We're going to the beach, Sophia, Inez shouted. Mommy was right. Inez needed a break. She already felt more energized than she had in months, and excited to have something to look forward to other than work, and more work. Sophia tipped her head back. Is that why you're in your underwear? Inez and Teddy explored the fifth and last car of the train, which was identical to the one the group had been hanging out in, with rows and rows of seats. No one had been using it, instinctively sticking close together, at least for comfort. Numbers, apparently, were no guarantee of safety. Inez was studying the still-working control panel by the door, wondering what the flashing amber light meant, when Teddy's rambling monologue finally caught her attention again. She'd tuned out ages ago. My inner black dude, he said. Inez looked at him. I'm sorry, what? Gabe. He must be my inner black dude. What the hell are you talking about? You don't have an inner black dude. You're as white as they come. He must be very deep inside me. Whoa, Teddy. Inez pointed at him. I'm the last person to criticize, but you're lucky no one caught that soundbite on camera. Honestly. Since Holden and his group had shown up, Teddy had been trying to figure out what parts of his psyche the new cast had manifested from. Holden was the secret, dorky aspect of his personality, which Inez suggested wasn't as secret as he thought. Nevaeh was his nurturing, supportive nature, which, yeah, Teddy was a nice guy. Saya clearly represented his libido because she was so pretty. That's when Inez had checked out, until he'd brought up his inner black dude, which, just thinking it, was all kinds of messed up. You okay, Inez? Teddy said. Is that Nevaeh talking? Inez smirked. I'm fine. Great, possibly. Look, I think I recognize that word. She tapped a red pictograph over the pulsing red hand scanner. She went to the closest seat for one of the safety instruction sheets and brought it back. One of the words in the header matched the icon on the scanner, and it appeared several more times on the page. She considered the sheet carefully. Their very own Rosetta Stone. Teddy scratched his chin. So you think it says emergency, or safety, or doom? Inez reached for the panel. Teddy touched her wrist. Wait, shouldn't we? You better not have been about to say, ask Holden. No way, though I kinda like him. Still, we might want to consult the others, or warn them before we try to stop the train. It's not like you're driving on the show, Speed Racer. When we activate the brakes, we should slow down, nice and easy, she said. But we'll be stranded in the middle of nowhere. Teddy glanced out the window. This is all nowhere, Inez said. And we are very fucking stranded already. Since sunrise, the landscape racing past the windows had been changing dramatically. The desert-like terrain had given way to rolling hills and fields, dotted with strange animals that looked like a cross between buffalo and sheep. They had a single curving horn protruding from their foreheads. So, unicorns then? Of course there would be unicorns here. She totally wanted one. Every now and then, Inez glimpsed a crumbling skyscraper, some remnant of a city perhaps, the sky beyond visible through its long shattered windows. Right now, snow-capped mountains loomed in the distance. Inez shivered. It was getting colder. She wondered if the onboard climate control was worked too. Maybe the others are right, and there's nothing to worry about, Teddy said. There's never nothing to worry about, Teddy. He nodded thoughtfully. True. The door ahead opened and Saya entered. Oh, there you are, she said. Teddy headed toward her. Looking for me. Is something wrong? Inez rolled her eyes. I was looking for Inez. Saya walked to the back of the train. She pressed her face to the glass of the window and stared at the tracks receding behind them. Did you find anything? Inez briefly considered whether she could trust Saya. What if Holden had sent her to spy for him? That was stupid. And she didn't care what Holden knew or thought about her anyway. I was about to activate this panel, which I think is the emergency brake, Inez said. Saya turned around. Let's do it, she said. Really? If you agreed we should stop the train, why didn't you back me up before? Inez asked. Or do you always follow Holden's lead? I don't, believe me, Saya said. So you two aren't... Saya gave Inez side-eye. We aren't whatever you're implying. I wouldn't even call him a friend. I was starting to warm to him, but methought I was enamored of an ass. Teddy snapped his fingers. Shakespeare. Maybe you're my acting talent. Inez snorted. I'm sorry? Saya asked. Ignore that. It's the only way to be friends with him, Inez said. Hey, Teddy said. Anyway, I don't know if we should stop the train or not, but it would be nice to know we can. I miss having control over what happens to us, especially after last night. Okay, then let's see what this does. Inez moved her hand really slowly toward the panel, looking at Saya expectantly, wondering if she would change her mind and try to stop her. Saya grinned. She grabbed Inez's hand and mashed the palm against the glass, Saya's own palm pressing against the back of her hand. The panel flickered red. Nothing else seemed to happen, at least not to the train. The air abruptly felt warmer, but that could have been only Inez. She felt a pang of disappointment when Saya took her hand away. Oh, maybe try both hands? Teddy said. Uh-huh. Because that would make it twice as secure? Inez smirked. I guess that's dumb. But since I thought of it, I figured it was worth a shot. Teddy rubbed the back of his head. As much as I hate to admit it, we don't have a better idea. Inez shrugged. She pressed her other hand to the panel. It flickered green, and the console lights lit up. Teddy whooped. Inez stared at the working controls in disbelief. Fuck. He's never going to let me forget this. Inez kept her hands in place and closed her eyes and tried to feel how fast the train was moving. "I don't think we're slowing down," she said. Inez withdrew her hands. The amber panel now was flashing an arrow pointing to the left, toward the back of the train. A solid arrow pointed to the right. "Huh," Inez said. "Progress or an error message?" Loki had shorted out the controls up front when he'd shot the caretaker, so maybe the electrical systems were hosed all over the train. "I'll see if the panels in the other cars are showing anything now," Teddy said. "I'll keep searching for a manual brake," Inez said. "I'll help you," Saya said. Teddy gave them a thumbs up and then stepped over to the next car. Inez looked at Saya. "So what did you mean by that? We thought I was enamored of an ass?" "Oh, I've remembered that I can't trust Holden," Saya said. "Why not? Did he do something to you?" Inez asked sharply. "Sort of. Holden and we knew each other before. We went to school together," Saya said. Inez raised her eyebrows. "Something tells me you both ending up here isn't a coincidence." "He got me killed." Saya tried to pull back the control panel. Inez joined the effort, but it wouldn't budge. "It was an accident." "Do you want to talk about it?" Inez asked. Saya shook her head. But a moment later, she went on. "I had car trouble. Holden was giving me a ride to an after-party for the play we were in." "A Midsummer Night's Dream?" Inez asked. Saya faltered. "Yeah. Do you act?" "No, but I know the play. One of my friends is in drama club. The rest are just into drama." Saya laughed. "Holden doesn't seem like the theater type," Inez said. "No, he doesn't. He played Mustard Seed." "I can see that. And you were Titania, of course." "Of course?" Saya's nose crinkled cutely. "The line you quoted." "Oh, yeah. Sometimes when I can't sleep, I run lines in my head. I know the whole play, all the parts. We really had a fantastic show." Saya fell quiet, seemingly lost in the memory of that night. Inez gave her some space and went to the right side of the train. Where would a manual brake be? Probably low, closer to the wheels. Probably hidden from idle passengers. She crouched on her hands and knees and peered under the seats, looking for a compartment in the floor, or a lever, or another control panel. There wasn't even so much as loose change or a gum wrapper under this seat or the two ahead of it. She got up and moved to the aisle, then leaned low to check under the next few seats. "The last thing I remember is bright headlights," Saya said suddenly. Inez looked back at Saya. "That's a shitty way to go." "Very comforting, Inez." "Yeah," Saya said. "And then I woke up on the space station." Have you heard about that yet?" "Yes, but despite everything I've seen lately, I still find it hard to believe." It had been shocking for Inez to wake up in bed with Teddy, but their bizarre captivity had helped her ease into this new world. And she'd come out of the experience with a good friend. Much better than waking up in a freaky hospital and immediately having to run for your life with a bunch of strangers. "Were you and Holden together on the station?" Inez asked. Saya gave her an odd look. "No, I was in a room by myself. I didn't find him until a day later, when we were escaping." She knelt and checked under the seats on the left side of the car. "You know, I think Holden feels really guilty about what happened to Weasley," Inez said. "Wesley. Right, that's a better name. And all the other missing and dead." She ducked down to check under another section. Nothing. But when she grabbed the seat and pulled herself up, the row wobbled slightly. That was new. Inez stood and pushed on the row of 2 seats. It was definitely shifting a little. She didn't know if it was designed that way or just broken. "Over here," Inez said. "I felt these seats move." Saya came over, and side by side, they rocked the seats back and forth. "One sec." Saya stepped back and studied the base of the seats. "Let's try picking them up and pitching them forward." "Like a couch bed?" Tia Ava and her girls shared a convertible bed in the living room at Inez's house. A temporary arrangement that, after 6 months and counting, was straining the definition of temporary. I bet they're sleeping in my bed now, Inez thought. She missed her lumpy bed in her real-life cupboard under the stairs. She even missed always having snot-faced kids underfoot, and someone hogging the bathroom every morning, and sisters stealing her books. Yes, on 3. Saya counted. 1, 2, 3. And together, they lifted the back of the seat and tilted it forward. It clicked into place, now resting on its arms and headrests. In the space that had been beneath it, there was nothing but dust. That's disappointing, Inez said. She and Saya felt around the gritty floor for seams. Holden's very protective of you. Of all of you, Inez said quietly. That's not a bad thing. I know, but sometimes he's overprotective and too cautious, especially today. I know he blames himself, and it's awful, but I kind of blame him too. And I guess it reminded me of what got me here in the first place. After a moment, Saya sighed. I should cut him some slack, is that what you're saying? I'd never say that. Dude got you dead, right? I'm only saying I can understand how he must feel. Why? Saya asked. If you don't mind. I don't. I just... Inez swallowed. She dragged a fingertip in the gray dust on the floor, drawing a large spiral. She wiped the grime off on her skirt, then leaned her hands on her knees and took a deep breath. My dad died a few years ago, and even though I know it wasn't my fault, I still feel responsible, she said. Why? My family blew a lot of money on my quinceañera, my 15th birthday. Is that like a coming out party? Inez smiled. Nah, I came out to them when I was 12. Oh, said Saya. Not exactly what I meant, but okay. My parents were pretty good about it, but there was definitely no celebration for that. Quinceañera is more like a sweet 16. Saya nodded. Papi worked hard to afford it. And he should have been spending the money to see a doctor. He had a condition we didn't know about, and it killed him. I'm sorry. Saya reached over and took Inez's hand. She squeezed gently. Inez felt that familiar flutter. She isn't flirting with you, and even if she was, this isn't the time, Inez. No matter how sexy her lips were. He gave me... Inez's fingers touched her throat, where her necklace had been every day since he died, until she died. Her hand fell. So I worked, as much as I could, to pay all the expenses we racked up from medical bills. Trying to make up for the fact that he's gone, I guess. I get it. That's a lot to carry. Sometimes you just have to do what has to be done. Inez swiped a hand across her wet eyes. And now that we've completely failed the Bechdel-Wallace test, let's talk about something other than the men in our lives. She smoothed her short skirt over her knees. You died on the way to a party, so, like, at night? I know exactly when we died. I can picture the dashboard clock. Isn't that weird? I must have been staring at it. I remember it vividly. 9:31 p.m. Saya's hand trembled in Inez's. 9:31, and you were on the East Coast. New York. So it would have been 6:31 on the West Coast. And Inez knew exactly what she'd been doing then. On October 14, 2016? Inez asked. Yeah, you too? Inez nodded. Do you think it means something? It must mean something, Saya said. When did you die? Inez had been hearing something similar from the others she'd talked to. It seemed morbid, but the question always came up here. Nice weather we're having. How about those caretakers? How did you die? Not everyone liked sharing the specifics, for their own private reasons. Not everyone even believed they had died. About the same time? So did Teddy. It seems pretty damn significant if you ask me. We aren't here because of a coincidence. So it isn't the fact that we died, but that we died at a specific time? Saya asked. That suggests... The train jolted, and they caught each other as they sprawled sideways. What was that? Saya asked. Let's go see. Inez climbed to her feet and reached down to help Saya up. They rejoined the rest of the group in the other passenger car, just as Holden rushed in from the front. He stopped short when he saw Inez and Saya standing close together. He shot Inez a questioning look. She ignored him and looked for Teddy. He was by the control panel, the others standing in a ring around him. "Did you get the brakes to work, Teddy?" Inez asked. "I didn't do that. This one isn't registering anyone's handprints." He waved at the panel in frustration. "We hit something," Holden said. "On the tracks. We came on it too fast to see it clearly, but I think it was a broken caretaker, a big one. We just powered right through, vaporized it." Holden looked shaky. "We tried to activate what I think is an emergency brake in the last car, but we aren't slowing down. Did you see anything change up front?" Inez asked. "That was you?" I heard a tone and then some machinery whirring and grinding in the control cabin, but it sounded stuck. A panel flashed gold a few times, then it faded away," Holden said. May rose from her seat. "Sounds like the computer was trying to execute a command, but couldn't." Gabe nodded. "I had the same thought." "There's something else," Holden said. Inez waited. And waited. "Well?" she said. "I saw a train station in the distance. We should be there." The sound of the air rushing past the train changed abruptly as they passed through a station. They were moving so fast, Inez only got impressions of it. The platform was dark and empty. But it looked similar to the ones where she and Teddy had gotten on and picked up the others. And then it was gone. We didn't stop," whispered a pale, thin boy. What was his name? Sebastian. She remembered because his long hair was red like the cartoon crab. "No kidding," Inez said. "That one was abandoned," Holden said. "Maybe the next one—" "They're all abandoned," Inez said. "The only time the train stops is when there's someone waiting there. And maybe when you hit the shiny red button, that no more worky." She looked for Loki. He was off by himself, fussing over the caretaker's body. She was surprised the others had let him bring it in here. Some of them were watching him warily, and she wasn't sure if they were afraid of him or the disabled robot. "Is he okay?" Inez asked Teddy quietly. "I think so. Everyone knows now that this is Loki's fault. But instead of getting defensive or sulky this time, he asked me to help him carry that caretaker, down here so he could work on it." Maybe Loki was feeling bad about killing it after all. At least he was trying to do something about it. That raised him up a notch in Inez's eyes. She quickly assessed the rest of the group. They were anxious and unsettled, but they were keeping it together. Except Hyrum. He was alone like Loki, staring out the window, his lips moving. What's going on there?" Inez asked. May heard her and glanced at the boy. "Oh, yeah. We broke Hyrum. He hasn't moved from that window since you left, and he won't talk to us. He just keeps counting." "Counting? What's he looking at?" "Will you be all right?" Inez asked Saya. "I'd like to check on him." "Sure." Saya smiled gratefully. "Thank you. Thou art as wise as thou art beautiful." Inez waved a hand. "Not so neither. But if I had wit, to remember the rest of this line—" She laughed. Saya clapped. "Brava!" Inez went to talk to Hyrum. "Hey, Hyrum. How are you doing over here?" She slid into a seat across the table from him. He held up a hand, still gazing out the window. He was counting all right. Then he slapped his hand on the table and blinked a few times. "Inez?" "Hyrum?" "I think we have a problem," he said. "I know we do. The train's out of control. You saw what happened at the station we just passed, right? What have you been doing?" "Look." He pointed out the window. "There should be one coming up in 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. There." Something flashed by the window. What was that? It had looked like a silver pole, placed just past the tracks. "A mile marker," Hyrum said. "A mile marker?" Inez chewed her lip. You mean... He nodded. Some of them are missing, so I have to wait until there's a series of them intact, but... You've been counting off the distance between them. Hyrum, you're a genius. The boy blushed. He reminded her a little of Mateo, she realized with a pang. An awkward kid who was usually a pain in the ass to be around, but was so clever and earnest, you couldn't help loving him. Giving your life for him. So, what's the deal? How fast are we moving? She asked. No idea. I was going to ask May to help me calculate our speed. Because she's Asian? Hyrum, that's kind of racist, Inez said gently. His forehead crinkled. It is? Not all Asians are good at math. Of course they aren't. But I know May is great with numbers. Oh, okay then, sorry, Inez said. And I know something else. He suddenly looked very frightened. Inez, the time between markers is getting shorter. Shit. She turned to look out the window, just as another mile marker flashed by. We're going faster. We're going too fast, Gabby screamed. Slow down. We're not, Inez said. They were a tiny bit. She let up on the accelerator. You're gonna kill us. In the rearview mirror, she saw Carmen cross herself in the back seat. We only have a few hours of sun left. Don't want to lose them, Inez said. Who goes to the beach in October? Gabby asked. We do. Inez gritted her teeth. Papi loved the beach, Sophia said beside Inez. That quieted them all down. Even going the legal speed limit, Inez got them to Fletcher Cove in record time. There wasn't much traffic to the beach on a Friday afternoon in October, even on an unseasonably warm day like this one. She parked the car and hustled the girls off to the changing rooms, making them carry the blankets, snacks, and beach gear. She listened to them laugh and shout in the adjacent stall while she changed into her lime green bikini. The one she'd bought for a beach date with Jennifer last summer, but never worn, because they had broken up before they saw each other again. You'd think a long-distance relationship would be perfect for someone with Inez's schedule, but she kept missing their video chats and falling asleep while they were talking on the phone. She used her cell phone's front-facing camera to check herself out. She was hot. She would totally do herself. She probably would, later. Inez considered taking a selfie and sending it to Jennifer, but instead she texted her friends. ETA? They'd been skeptical about hanging out at the beach, but said they'd try to come by to catch up with her, even if they didn't go in the water. They had something else to do after school first. Lida's boyfriend's cover band had a gig at Old Cal Coffee. They hadn't bothered inviting her, and she wouldn't have been able to go anyway. She sort of resented having the night off, but not being able to make her own plans. But hadn't she wanted to go to the beach? Or was that because Mommy had told her to? When she stepped into the sand, she knew she'd made the right decision. She breathed in the fresh, sea-scented air, tipped her head back, stretched her arms out at her sides. She didn't want to be anywhere else. This was way better than sitting in the dark, listening to a bunch of amateurs fumble their way through a crummy version of a crummy song from a crummy band. Hey, Mamacita, you lookin' fine. Inez opened her eyes and saw a thin, barely pubescent boy ogling her. His black and gold swim trunks were practically falling off his waist, and he was wearing mirrored shades like some outcast from the 1980s. Jesus, they started young. Inez flipped him off. Sorry, Nino, you aren't my type. I only date humans. I'm telling Mom, Gabby said. You used a rude gesture. Inez turned around. Oh, you have sisters, the boy went on. That's okay. There's plenty of Juan to go around. Ew, Inez said. Listen, is that your mommy calling? Run along now, Juanito. The beach would be perfect if there were no people there. She should come back in January. Then there'd only be the hardcore surfers to deal with. Inez marched her sisters as close to the shore as they could get. A handful of umbrellas dotted the beach, and there were lots of girls working on their tans while they could. Inez grinned. This was more like it. She gazed toward the horizon. Kids splashed in the surf, running up and down the beach trying to outrun the waves. The late afternoon sunlight sparkled on the water. Inez realized she had a big, goofy grin on her face. Then she saw the lifeguard in his station, staring at her with his binoculars. "Hey, eyes on the water, idiot!" Inez drew a loop in the air with her finger, pointing him to the ocean. "Over there!" God damn it. She was feeling so sexy and good about herself, and dumbass men always had to ruin it for her. She wasn't wearing this outfit for them. Okay, she bought it for Jennifer, but now she was wearing it because she wanted to feel like a person for a few fucking hours. Not just a daughter, a sister, a surrogate father, a cashier. And was it too much to hope that she might meet an attractive girl and end up with something that vaguely resembled a normal life? "Inez!" A little boy ran up to them, kicking up sand. As he hurtled himself through the air, she hastily positioned her arms to catch him. Apparently, it was too much to hope for, yes. She wasn't going to get rid of this adorable disaster for the rest of the afternoon. "Hi, Mateo." She deposited him back on the ground and ruffled his hair, which was already thick and gritty from salt and sand. "Where's your mother?" He shrugged. "Do you want to build a sandman?" "No," Inez said. "It doesn't have to be a sandman." "Maybe later." "You always say that when you mean no." "Yep, because no one listens when I say no." Inez unfolded a chair and plopped it into the sand. Then she plopped onto it. "Kids, I am off duty. Find Tia Ava and Tia Clara. Don't kill each other. Have fun." Inez started lathering on sunscreen while watching a beautiful, leggy blonde in an R2-D2 swimsuit walking past. She whistled like the little Star Wars droid, too low for the girl to hear. "Hey, mamacita," Inez thought. Unfortunately, there was a guy trailing behind the blonde. Inez wasn't sure if they were together, and he didn't look like he was sure either. Good luck, bro. Inez checked her phone. It was already 4:02, and still no word from her friends. They weren't coming. She put down the phone, slipped on her sunglasses, and then closed her eyes. She listened to the soothing sound of the waves washing up against the sand, and the not-soothing sound of her family splashing and screeching as they played. She sighed and opened her eyes again. Mateo and Gabby were sitting not far away, building a sandman together. Sophia was standing hip-deep in the water, not moving except when a wave crashed into her. Carmen? Where was Carmen? Inez lifted her head until she spotted her sister. She had found their aunts, and was playing with Olivia and Anna. Every inch of the twin girls was covered in rash guard fabric. Their faces were coated in white sunblock, and they were practically lost under floppy, wide-brimmed hats. Better safe than sorry. Inez smiled. This was perfect. She loved her family, especially when they were nearby, but she didn't have to worry about them for a little while. She cracked open her library copy of Snowpiercer and started reading, glancing up occasionally to check for cute girls. "We're speeding up," Holden asked. "Are you sure?" Inez nodded to the table where Hyrum and May had been huddling for the last half hour. They didn't have anything to write with, so May had been crunching the numbers in her head. Even Inez had to admit, that was impressive. The rest of the gang was gathered around watching her math. "Ask them," Inez said. "May?" Holden said. May's eyes were closed. After a long pause, she responded without opening them. "You know those word problems from school? A train is traveling at 300 miles an hour. If it increases its speed by 10 miles an hour every hour, how long before it reaches its destination?" "I suck at those," Gabe muttered. Holden frowned. "It depends on the distance to the destination, yeah?" "Trick question," May opened her eyes. "There are two possibilities. One, we get to the last stop, wherever that is, and we run out of track at top speed. If that happens in the next 10 minutes, that speed would be 380 miles an hour. But I'm not too worried about that." "Why not?" Saya asked. "Because of option 2. The train flies apart if we go too fast." Oh my God, Nevaeh said. How fast is too fast? Inez asked. When the train flies apart, May said. Obviously. So even if we're on a closed track, eventually the train rips itself to pieces, Inez said. Holden shook his head. There has to be a safety measure. I'm sure there was, but either the caretaker disabled it, or we did when we disabled the caretaker, Inez said. May nodded. We're already moving beyond what I would consider a safe speed. She pressed her hand to the glass. Feel that. Inez pressed her hand to the bulkhead. May was right. When they'd first boarded, the motion was so smooth you could barely tell they were moving without looking out a window. But now there was a noticeable vibration, and it felt erratic. We have to find a way to slow it down as soon as possible. We don't know how much more track there is in front of us, Amelia said. Inez gave the girl an appraising glance. Amelia's soft appearance was hiding some hard edges. She seemed like the kind of person who didn't say much, but when she did, you'd better listen. Holden nodded. Or we might hit bigger debris. Did you guys find anything back there? It seems like you're supposed to be able to activate emergency brakes with those panels, but they aren't working. Could be an electrical problem, Inez said. Cole cleared his throat. They might not work if the brakes use the train's propulsion. Everyone looked at him in surprise. My son loves trains. His voice thickened. And he asks a lot of questions. Inez nodded. She knew what that was like. Her sisters had been bad, but Mateo was really curious about everything. What did parents do before you could find out anything on the internet? Probably made shit up. So I learned a lot of random trivia about trains, Cole went on. Anyway, if the computer is saying, go faster, it might not accept a command to apply the brakes. Propulsion in the opposite direction. But each car should have a physical lever or wheel to engage the brakes manually. It would be disguised, so passengers don't mess with it. Maybe behind an advertisement or under a seat. You are my favorite person right now, Inez said. Aside from me, Teddy said. Right? Inez shook her head slowly. We found a seat that moves in the last car, but there was nothing under it, Saya said. Cole pulled himself up and winced. Let me see. Inez and Saya led the group to the last train car and showed Cole the sliding seat. He glanced at the bare floor for a second before turning his attention to the seat itself. What about this? He pointed to a square card affixed to the bottom of the seat, with some more of that strange writing and a picture of a circle. Maybe there's a hidden panel. Holden pressed a hand against the floor, then two hands. Inez and Saya exchanged a look. Holden kept sliding them around in different places. Is this the first time you felt up a train? Never mind, I can tell it is, Inez said. Holden's face bloomed red. I'm trying to help, he said. I can read it. The group parted as Umta limped her way down the aisle. Umta? Holden moved to help her. Nevaeh joined him, and together they supported the injured woman. You can really read that? Inez asked. Umta studied the text solemnly. Then she translated. Emergency use only. Open panel by gesturing clockwise 3 times on touch panel. Lift handle inside to release air and lock brakes. Exercise extreme caution. Follow instructions of train crew. Go on, Inez said. Umta shook her head. Holden sprang forward. I'll do it. My hero, Inez thought. Holden traced a circle with his finger in the center of the rectangular floor panel. The circle glowed faintly in the gray speckled surface. He followed the path again, and it glowed more brightly. When he completed the circle a 3rd time, the rectangular outline of a door appeared, where there definitely had not been one before. That section of floor slid away, to reveal a small compartment beneath it, containing a lever with a red handle. Holden reached for it. He hesitated. You should do it, Inez. This was your idea. Thanks, you go ahead. I'll get the next one, she said. The next one? We have to repeat this in every car, Inez said. Holden's eyes widened. Oh, yeah. Well, here goes nothing. He wrapped his hand around the lever and yanked hard. It didn't budge. He tried again. Again. Damn it! Why doesn't anything work on this train? Inez asked. Just kidding. Holden smiled and flipped the lever. You ass! Inez was cut off by a hiss of air, followed by a horrendous screeching. The train car shuddered, and she felt the tiniest lurch. The shriek of metal being dragged against metal continued. Glowing sparks flew past the window. I think that worked, Inez shouted. She waved everyone toward the front of the car. Hurry, let's do the next one. Loki looked up in surprise when they burst into the passenger car they'd all been riding in together. Pieces of the caretaker were spread out in front of him on a table. Inez doubted anything useful would come of it, but at least his project was keeping him busy and out of her hair. Inez mimicked Holden's actions to access a hidden brake compartment in the same place as the one in the adjoining car. She flipped the lever. The car shimmied, and the horrible noise got even louder. She covered her ears and led the group to the next car up. For a moment, Loki looked like he was going to follow them, but then he hunched his shoulders and went back to tinkering. The sleeping car felt a little wobbly. I don't know where the brake is on this car, or the next one, Inez said. Let's split up. Half of us can keep looking here, while the rest of us get started in the dollhouse up ahead. Just don't pull the brake in there until we activate this one. Why not? Sebastian asked. Think about it. We have to pull the brakes in order from the last car forward, or the stress will tear the train apart, Inez said. She took Teddy, Saya, Hyrum, Sebastian, and May with her, leaving Umta, Cole, Gabe, Alex, Nevea, Amelia, and Holden to search the sleeping car. Inez took in the surreal car. Check under and behind anything you can move. Concentrate on the sides over the wheels. The door opened again, and Gabe stepped in. Found it already? She asked him. They're working on it. I thought you could use more hands up here, since it's such a mess. He looked past her, to where May was struggling to shove the large, plastic bed away from a wall. Inez swept out a hand. Knock yourself out. As they searched, Hyrum paused to admire a picture painted over one of the windows. An image of a train like theirs, flying through a field of stars and nebulae, on some galactic railroad. Wesley would have liked this, he said. Hyrum touched the painting, and a small, triangular fragment of it flaked off. Oops. A beam of sunlight streamed in through the opening, catching motes of dust in the air. He pressed an eye against the exposed glass and looked out. He gasped, and then started picking at the edges of the peephole with his fingernails to clear more of the window pane. The painted train crackled and crumbled away, until Inez saw landscape racing by outside. We're slowing down, Hyrum said. Hallelujah, Inez said. The natural light in the dark train car made it seem a little less disturbing. Only a little. While Inez was looking under a couch, the car tipped slightly downward at the back for a split second, then jiggled a little. The metal around them groaned, and the vibration of the wheels on the track became uneven and alarming. The rear door opened, and Holden stepped in. Found it? Pulled it. Good. And Hyrum says it's working. We're slowing down. Let's hurry this up, Inez said. Holden and his team joined the search. 5 minutes later, they still hadn't found the brake. It was under the last set of bunks in the previous car. We couldn't figure out how to move the beds, so we sent Alex to activate it. Holden clapped Alex on the back. The boy ducked his head and looked uncomfortable. Next to Hyrum, Alex was the smallest and thinnest member of the group. Could the caretaker have removed or blocked the compartment in here? Inez asked. Maybe. Hopefully if we find the brake in the control cab, it'll be enough to stop the train, Holden said. They were headed up the aisle when the door to the control cab opened, and thick black smoke billowed out. Sunita stumbled out a moment later, coughing, tears streaming down her face. We have a problem, she wheezed. Inez was snapped awake by a piercing scream. She sat up and spat sand from her mouth. What the hell? Why am I covered in sand? The 6 2-foot-high sandmen lined up in front of her beach chair gave her a clue to the culprit. Mateo. But he was nowhere in sight. The sun had sunk low, kissing the horizon, and the squat sculpture's long shadows reached menacingly toward Inez. She must have dozed off while reading. So much for enjoying the beach. She'd missed the whole afternoon. But she must have needed the sleep more. Inez heard another shriek. So she hadn't dreamed it. It sounded like... Carmen! Inez jumped up and ran toward the sound, toward the water. Sophia was heading for Inez. Beyond, Carmen was pointing out at the ocean. There was a break in the waves, a stretch of green, cloudy water spreading out like a mushroom cloud. And right in the middle, a dark speck, rapidly moving away from shore. Where was Gabby? There, splashing out into the water. Tia's Clara and Ava were nearby, their arms around each other, as they rocked back and forth on their knees in the sand. Mateo? Inez said, as Sophia intercepted her. Neither of them stopped. They raced to the water together. He was pulled out to sea, Sophia sobbed. Now she heard her youngest sisters calling. Mateo? Mateo! And that mournful wailing over the crashing surf wasn't seagulls. It was Clara. Inez kept an eye on the dark spot that was Mateo as he moved quickly, far too quickly, to deeper water. He wasn't a good swimmer yet. He usually kept close to the beach, and they'd all been warned about rip currents. But they could form without warning, and judging from the choppy water, this was a big one. Where was that fucking lifeguard? She was going to punch him in the face. After Mateo was safe. Inez splashed into the shallow water. It was so cold. She almost lost her balance as a wave broke against her knees. She ran up to a little girl, staring out at the disappearing boy, and snatched her pink kickboard. Inez kept racing toward her drowning cousin, ignoring the girl's tearful protest. And then she was swimming. She was soon swept up in the same current, and almost lost her breath when the frigid water slammed into her back. She swam with it, slowly gaining on Mateo, holding her head up with the foam board. Inez! His arms flailed. Help! Mateo! Her family shouted to them. Oh, and there was the lifeguard's whistle, finally. Dillhole. It seemed to take forever to reach Mateo, but it was probably only a matter of minutes. It was a miracle that she was able to find him. The greater miracle would be getting them both out of this. Good boy. He was trying to tread water instead of fighting the current. So he had been paying attention to their warnings. Mateo, grab onto me, Inez called. She swam up to him and reached out. He jerked and struggled, and suddenly they were both going down. Inez swallowed salt water and her eyes burned. She broke the surface and hoisted Mateo up, yelling at him to stop. He grabbed at her and snagged her necklace, breaking the delicate chain. The gold cross vanished into the murky depths. Mateo! Inez heaved him onto the kickboard. It was child-sized, just large enough to support his upper body. He coughed and coughed and coughed. Coughing was good. He was still alive, still breathing. For now. Inez let the current take them. You could ride one of these out until the current ended, or sometimes they looped back toward the shore. But she figured the longer they were out here, the worse it would be getting back, and Mateo might not make it that long. She swore it was pulling them along even faster than before. So she started kicking as hard as she could, pushing the kickboard and Mateo along in front of her. You were supposed to swim perpendicular to the rip current to get clear of it, so she swam to the left, parallel to shore, aiming for the breaking waves. But this current was wide and powerful. They got farther and farther away from land. She couldn't see her sisters and aunts anymore. Her vision narrowed to the frightened boy on the pink board in front of her. Swim, Mateo, Inez whispered. Don't give up. She wasn't a strong swimmer herself, and she was tiring out. Her lungs were on fire. Her legs were like rubber. But she kept kicking until she couldn't feel them anymore. Until she couldn't keep her head above water anymore. She gave Mateo and the kickboard one more mighty shove with the last of her strength. But water filled Inez's nose and throat. She slipped down, and down, and down. Fucking lifeguard. Make that 2 problems. When they tried to get water for Sunita back in the coach, they discovered the well had run dry. The food printers, or whatever they were, weren't working anymore. But that wasn't as bad as the fact that the front of the train was burning. Oh, and even though it had slowed down, it was still going too fast. So they were trapped on a runaway train, which was on fire, and they had no water. Awesome. Thanks for warning me you were going to hit the brakes, Sunita said with a hoarse voice. I didn't know anyone was still up there. Inez glared at Holden. What happened? Holden asked. The train sort of hiccuped a couple of times, and the wheels got loud and screechy. Sunita coughed. Inez patted her on the back delicately. The cabin was shaking, Sunita went on. I smelled burnt coffee, and then the floor behind me burst into flames, so I got out of there. What caused the fire? Nevaeh asked. Friction, probably, May said. The wheels are locked back here, but the rest of the train is still trying to accelerate. That's brilliant, May, Gabe said. She looked at him uncertainly, as if she were trying to figure out if he was being sincere. Cole said so earlier. The train has automatic safety overrides, so you can't brake while the engine's going full steam ahead. We overrode the overrides. Something has to give. Holden looked up. The train's sprinklers should put the fire out. The train is broken, Inez said, and it's getting more broken by the minute. What are we going to do? Saya asked. You guys closed the door to the burning cabin, right? Amelia piped up. Inez and Holden looked at each other. We were worried about Sunita, Holden said. Come on, that's like basic fire safety, Amelia said. Teddy hurried to the front of the car. He peered through the glass window in the door and turned back immediately, his face pale. You remember that creepy furniture we hate? Apparently, it's extremely flammable. Well, shit, Inez said. The group quickly retreated to the last car. How long until it spreads back here? Hyrum asked. The kid usually seemed together, but he was still young, and he was frightened. Maybe the fire was affirming his theory that they were in hell. Seeing him look so scared, so much like Mateo, broke Inez's heart. She had to save him. It might not reach us, Cole said. He put an arm around Hyrum. Gabe shot Cole a dubious look, and Cole frowned at him over Hyrum's head, warning him to go along with it. But we can't stay on a burning train long. Who knows what will happen, Inez said. Does this say what we should do? She handed the sheet of safety instructions to the woman and pointed to the cartoon of the person on fire. It showed the sprinklers going off and a caretaker streaming something foamy from its torso. It looked, well, kind of obscene. Looked it over. Very slowly. Exasperated, Inez turned back to Cole. You know about trains. How do we detach a car from the rest of the train? Cole's eyebrows shot up. Well, we're moving. If we could stop, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Even if we managed it, anything could happen. If we don't, we'll definitely burn, or explode, or derail. Anything worse than that? Cole frowned. Reckon not. Here we go, Teddy said. Shush, you. Let's check it out. Inez, Cole, and Teddy returned to the front of the car and opened the door into the vestibule. Inez smelled smoke and saw an ominous glow from the car ahead of them. Cole reached for one of the doors on the side of the vestibule. Whoa, what are you doing? Teddy asked. I have to look under the gangway to figure out how the cars are connected. This is the only way. Cole twisted the handle. Hold on. He opened the door, and freezing air rushed through the narrow space. Inez grabbed onto Teddy, and he held onto the doorframe.
"Oh, good. It's unlocked,"
Cole shouted in the wind.
"I thought we'd have to get Loki to shoot it open. I guess they wouldn't expect anyone to try this, because it's a terrible idea."
Teddy wrapped an arm around Cole's waist as the farm boy leaned over the edge to examine the connection under the 2 train cars. After what felt like a long time, Cole drew himself up and laughed. "That bad, huh?" Inez shouted over the roar of the wind and the wheels and the still screeching brakes.
"The coupler isn't mechanical. I was expecting a giant metal thing that weighs hundreds of pounds. Impossible to budge without serious tools. This is a bit more advanced than a John Deere tractor, but it looks like the cars are connected with magnets. Big ones."
"What does that mean?" Inez asked.
"It's easier to separate them if you can cut off power to the couplers."
"Can we operate it from a console inside?" Inez asked hopefully. He shook his head.
"Never."
He suddenly leaned over again. Teddy grabbed for him at the last second. Inez flinched. Cole was dangling way over the side, actually pulling himself farther under the train. Teddy strained with the effort of hanging on to him. Inez held onto Cole's ankles. A moment later, Cole gestured frantically with a hand to be pulled back in. They yanked backward and he tumbled inside.
"Dude,"
Teddy said.
"Thanks,"
Cole gasped. His hair was wild and his cheeks were flushed.
"There's a power switch lever down there. Hand-operated, but I couldn't reach it. It's too far down. Directly under the coupler."
"How was someone supposed to get to it in an emergency?" Inez asked.
"Be a caretaker?"
Teddy said. Inez shuddered.
"I've seen trains linking up. Normally, the car would be stationary, and the train would be nudged into it very gently,"
Cole said.
"The rail worker's on the ground to secure it, or the train is going slowly enough that he isn't worried about falling."
"We'll have to make do with what we've got. Let's go," Inez said.
"Hold on. Shouldn't we run this by everyone else?"
Inez hesitated, unwilling to lose even more precious time. But she nodded, and they went back to tell the others what they were up against. "So it looks like we need to pull that switch to disengage the magnetic coupling and separate this car from the rest of the train," Inez said.
"How do we do that while we're moving?"
Holden asked. "Someone small and light climbs under the train," Inez said.
"You mean Hyrum or Alex?"
Holden said.
"No way we're doing that."
"It's their choice," Inez said.
Holden shook his head.
"I can try," Hyrum said. Alex lowered his eyes. "No, I'll go," Sunita said. She was sitting with her legs stretched out along one of the passenger seats. "I've done more dangerous things than that." She fell quiet, and Inez wondered how the girl had died.
"But you're hurt," Holden said. "Inez, I don't think we can do this."
"We can't debate it all day," Inez said. "Yes, whoever goes could die, but if they don't, we all definitely will." She stood straighter. "It's my idea, so I'll do it. Come on, Teddy."
"I knew you'd say that."
Teddy sighed. "Wait," Holden said. "No more waiting. Everyone who wants to live should stay in this car," Inez said. "Anyone who wants to stay on the burning death train should move up one car." They all looked at one another, perhaps wondering who would be the first to leave, or waiting to take the lead from someone else. Holden glanced at the door, then at Saya, who had her arms folded. She wasn't going anywhere. Which meant Holden would stay too. Good. If he left, no telling how many others would follow. Hyrum, Amelia, and Sunita already supported Inez's plan, and it seemed that Nevaeh, Sebastian, and May planned to stick with them. Gabe looked like he wanted to stick with May. Cole was still freaked. The curse of knowing too much about what could go wrong. He had probably hoped the group would talk Inez out of this plan. It was hard to read Alex. The boy was easily the shyest of the bunch. He seemed content to go with the flow without clearly picking a side. For a moment, Inez thought Umta had snuck off, but she was simply good at fading into the background. The strange woman crouched in a corner on the far end of the car, watching Inez silently. Inez looked away quickly and locked her eyes onto Loki. If anyone was going to leave, it was him. He stood and stared at the floor, hands clenched at his sides. Then, surprisingly, he sat down again. He leaned back in his seat and shut his eyes. "This is going to work," Teddy said. He sounded like he was trying to convince himself as much as the others. Inez walked over to the door at the front of the car. "If we have enough track and we stay on it, this car will slow down eventually, once it's decoupled from the rest of the train. It'll take..." She glanced back at May. "A while," May said. "Just in case, everyone grab onto something," Inez said. Inside the vestibule, Teddy closed the door behind them. "Any chance I can talk you out of this?" he asked. "Nope," Inez said. "Times like this, I wonder if you really are a figment of my imagination. If you're in my head, why don't you ever listen to me?" "I listen to you plenty, Teddy," Inez said, "but I make up my own mind. The thing is, I'm the expendable one here. I'm losing my mind, or I'm going to soon. Let me do this." He smiled. "You know, my mother had these big plans for me, the future I knew I would never have. After football nights, she wanted me to spin off a college show. And then, Hollywood. She always said I was going to be the next big action hero. I guess this is my only shot." "Hollywood has CGI and stunt doubles, but there's only one Teddy, and I'm not losing him." Another of those mile markers whizzed by. "I'm not losing anyone else." "Well, I need you. And so do they." Teddy jerked his thumb back at the car behind them. "Doesn't matter. You're too big and heavy to go climbing underneath a train. But you're hopefully big enough and heavy enough to hang on to me while I do it." Inez hugged Teddy. "This time, I'm not saying goodbye." Inez let go and lay on her stomach. Flat like this, close to the edge, she didn't feel like the wind was going to push her out of the train. For now. She slowly scooted toward the opening. Teddy clutched her legs firmly. "This is just like a cheerleading move," he shouted. "I'm not a cheerleader. I only play one on TV," she said. "You got me?" He squeezed his fingers. "Always." Inez inched forward until she was peering over the threshold. It was one thing to see the landscape blasting past them, but she froze when she looked down and saw the ground speeding by beneath the train. She clenched her teeth and wormed her way forward slowly. Her short hair blew every which way. Air rushed in her ears. "What the hell are you doing, Inez?" Whatever it was, she kept doing it. Inch by inch, she went over the side. Soon she was hanging upside down, holding on to the greasy undercarriage to prevent the strong wind from ripping her from Teddy's grip. Her skirt flapped in the breeze. "Enjoy the show, Teddy. Please don't drop me." She eyed the racing wheels on either side of her, an arm's length away, and she felt queasy. So this was totally terrifying. She closed her eyes. No, that was worse. The track zipped along less than a foot from her head. Sparks flew off the brakes and wheels behind them like 4th of July fireworks. Pebbles and grit pinged off the metal frame. One pelted the side of her neck. "Focus, Inez." She saw 2 interlocking metal arms joining the car. The coupler. And just below it was the lever Cole had described, a simple bar with a red handle. Inez bent at the waist, doing an upside-down crunch until she was clinging to the underside of the train. Then she pulled herself toward the lever, grabbing onto any handhold she could. Cables, metal struts, and finally the coupler itself. Teddy's hands were painfully tight around her calves. Inez reached for the power switch. Shit! Her arms were too short. She inched a little farther, switching her grip to a handful of stiff cables. She almost screamed when she felt Teddy let go of her right leg for a split second, but he was only adjusting his grip to give her more reach. He shifted his hold on her left leg, and now he was supporting her by the ankles. She couldn't look back, but she knew Teddy was probably dangerously close to the open door himself. Make it quick. Do it. Now. She lunged, clinging to the bottom of the train with one hand on the switch, the other wrapped in the cables. She was having difficulty breathing, and the air was pushing against her hard, trying to send her under the train's wheels. She held on, and Teddy held on. She felt the train's vibration in her bones and teeth. She tightened her grip on the handle, which was getting slippery with sweat, and yanked to pull it down. She heard a mild zip as the juice fizzled out of the electromagnets and the trains separated. She was prepared to be thrown forward from a sudden deceleration, but instead, she felt the slightest bump, the sensation of her stomach dropping for a moment. If she didn't know better, she'd have thought they were still being pulled along, but when she looked to her right, she saw the distance increasing between her and the other car. The cables in her hand grew taut. They were still connecting the two trains. Inez grunted and grasped for the car's coupler just before the cables snapped. One of them lashed her left shoulder like a whip as it sprang back, and she cried out from the shock and pain. Her arms burned. She couldn't hold on much longer. She bet Teddy couldn't either. Maybe she should let go. Only she didn't think Teddy would let her go, so she'd only pull him down with her. "I think I can," Inez said. She started to pick her way back toward the side of the train. I think I can. As she worked her way back toward the open vestibule door, she felt Teddy's grip tighten, and that gave her more confidence. She forced herself not to hurry, and then, finally, she was dangling again from her waist, and Teddy dragged her back inside. He hugged her close until she stopped trembling from fear, adrenaline, and cold. "Smooth, Inez," Teddy said. "Never do anything like that again." "Never let me do anything like that again." Inez twisted around on the floor and slammed the door shut. Teddy helped her stand on unsteady legs, and they looked out the window in the forward-facing door. The rest of the cars sped away from them, trailing a plume of black smoke like an old diesel train. Flames licked out of broken windows from the Barbie nightmare house. She smoothed her skirt down, and they went back inside the car. Holden started clapping, and the rest of the group joined in. Inez held up an aching hand and felt a sharp twinge in her arm. Her left shoulder throbbed with pain. Ow. This is going to feel a hell of a lot worse tomorrow. But at least there will probably be a tomorrow. Let's not celebrate until we've stopped. The train car must have been equipped with smart technology that still worked independently of the damaged computer. When they decoupled from the rest of the train, it applied the brakes gradually. Soon, they were safely standing on a dirt embankment beside the train car. The group cheered again. Inez remained silent. She stamped her feet on the frozen soil and hugged herself to stay warm. She wasn't going to last long in this cold weather wearing her thin, short cheerleader getup. Maybe they could use the train car as shelter, but she'd want to get it off the tracks first somehow, in case another train came along without warning. "Now what?" Nevaeh asked. "Where are we?" "We'll have to scout to figure that out," Loki said. "Welcome back to the group, dickwad," Inez thought. "But it's getting dark and the temperature is dropping, so we'd better find shelter. Not in there." Loki nodded at the train car. "Why not?" Nevaeh asked. "Because—" Inez was interrupted by an earth-shaking, echoing boom that she felt as much as heard. The terrible sound of twisting metal, like a giant beast screaming in the night. "There goes the train," Cole said. "Holy crap!" Holden sat down heavily in the dirt. Inez felt shaky herself at their close call. She reached for the necklace that wasn't there, and squeezed her hand around the emptiness that she carried along with her. She crossed herself instead. The wreckage of the front section of the train was an orangey, flickering light. So far away it looked like the dancing flame of a candle. It looked nice and warm over there. "End of the line," she said. Teddy started laughing hysterically. "Teddy?" Inez asked. "You did set the train on fire." Inez punched him in the arm. "Like I said, Plan D."
Remade is a Realm original production. You're listening to Remade Season 1 by E.C. Myers. Produced by Realm, your portal to another world. Listen away. Remade is a Realm original production, created by Matthew Cody and written by Matthew Cody, Andrea Phillips, Carrie Harris, E.C. Myers, Kiersten White, and Gwenda Bond. Produced by Lydia Shama, and executive produced by Julian Yap and Molly Barton. Starring Greg Tremblay and Laurel Schroeder. Audio directed, produced, and sound designed by Amanda Rose Smith. Additional editing by Corey Barton. Original theme composed by Amanda Rose Smith. Cover art by Liz Castle. Find more shows like Remade by following Realm on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or at realm.fm.